Chapter 36. A letter from Charles I. The reader must now cross the Seine with us and follow us to the door of the Carmelite convent in the Rue Saint-Jacques. It is 11 o'clock in the morning, and the pious sisters have just finished saying Mass for the success of the armies of King Charles I. Leaving the church, a woman and a young girl dressed in black, the one as a widow and the other as an orphan, have re-entered their cell. The woman kneels on a prie-dieu of painted wood, and at a short distance from her stands the young girl, leaning against a chair, weeping. The woman must have once been handsome, but traces of sorrow have aged her. The young girl is lovely, and her tears only embellish her. The lady appears to be about 40 years of age, the girl about 14. "Oh, God," prayed the kneeling suppliant, "protect my husband, guard my son, and take my wretched life instead." "Oh, God," murmured the girl, "leave me my mother." "Your mother can be of no use to you in this world, Henrietta," said the lady, turning around. "Your mother has no longer either throne or husband. She has neither son, money, nor friends. The whole world, my poor child, has abandoned your mother." And she fell back, weeping, into her daughter's arms. "Courage, take courage, my dear mother," said the girl. "Ah, 'tis an unfortunate year for kings," said the mother. "And no one thinks of us in this country, for each must think about his own affairs. As long as your brother was with me, he kept me up, but he is gone and can no longer send us news of himself, either to me or to your father. I have pledged my last jewels, sold your clothes and my own to pay his servants, who refused to accompany him unless I made this sacrifice. We are now reduced to live at the expense of these daughters of heaven. We are the poor, succored by God. But why not address yourself to your sister, the Queen?" asked the girl. "Alas, the Queen, my sister, is no longer queen, my child. Another reigns in her name. One day you will be able to understand how all this is. Well, then, to the king, your nephew. Shall I speak to him? You know how much he loves me, my mother. Alas, my nephew is not yet king, and you know Laporte has told us 20 times that he himself is in need of almost everything." "Then let us pray to heaven," said the girl. The two women who thus knelt in united prayer were the daughter and granddaughter of Henry IV, the wife and daughter of Charles I. They had just finished their double prayer when a nun softly tapped at the door of the cell. "Enter, my sister," said the Queen. "I trust your Majesty will pardon this intrusion on her meditations, but a foreign lord has arrived from England and waits in the parlor, demanding the honor of presenting a letter to your Majesty." "Oh, a letter. A letter from the king, perhaps. News from your father. Do you hear, Henrietta? And the name of this lord, Lord de Winter." "Lord de Winter," exclaimed the Queen, "the friend of my husband." "Oh, bid him enter." And the Queen advanced to meet the messenger, whose hand she seized affectionately, whilst he knelt down and presented a letter to her, contained in a case of gold. "Ah, my lord," said the Queen, "you bring us 3 things which we have not seen for a long time. Gold, a devoted friend, and a letter from the king, our husband and master." De Winter bowed again, unable to reply from excess of emotion. On their side, the mother and daughter retired into the embrasure of a window to read eagerly the following letter. "Dear wife, we have now reached the moment of decision. I have concentrated here at Naseby camp all the resources heaven has left me, and I write to you in haste from thence. Here I await the army of my rebellious subjects. I am about to struggle for the last time with them. If victorious, I shall continue the struggle. If beaten, I am lost. I shall try in the latter case, alas. In our position, One must provide for everything. I shall try to gain the coast of France. But will they receive an unhappy king, who will bring such a sad story into a country already agitated by civil discord? Your wisdom and your affection must serve me as guides. The bearer of this letter will tell you, madame, what I dare not trust to pen and paper and the risks of transit. He will explain to you the steps that I expect you to pursue. I charge him also with my blessing for my children and with the sentiments of my soul for yourself, my dearest sweetheart. The letter bore the signature, not of Charles, king, but of Charles, still king. And let him be no longer king, cried the queen. Let him be conquered, exiled, proscribed, provided he still lives. Alas! In these days, the throne is too dangerous a place for me to wish him to retain it. But my lord, tell me, she continued, hide nothing from me. What is, in truth, the king's position? Is it as hopeless as he thinks? Alas! Madame, more hopeless than he thinks. His Majesty has so good a heart that he cannot understand hatred, is so loyal that he does not suspect treason. England is torn in twain by a spirit of disturbance which, I greatly fear, blood alone can exorcise. But Lord Montrose, replied the Queen, I have heard of his great and rapid successes of battles gained. I heard it said that he was marching to the frontier to join the king. Yes, madame, but on the frontier he was met by Leslie. He had tried victory by means of superhuman undertakings. Now victory has abandoned him. Montrose, beaten at Philiphaugh, was obliged to disperse the remains of his army and to fly, disguised as a servant. He is at Bergen in Norway. Heaven preserve him, said the Queen. It is at least a consolation to know that some who have so often risked their lives for us are safe. And now, my lord, that I see how hopeless the position of the king is, tell me with what you are charged on the part of my royal husband. Well, then, madame, said De Winter, the king wishes you to try and discover the dispositions of the king and queen toward him. Alas! You know that even now the king is but a child, and the queen a woman weak enough. Here, Monsieur Mazarin is everything. Does he desire to play the part in France that Cromwell plays in England? Oh, no. He is a subtle, conscienceless Italian, who, though he very likely dreams of crime, dares not commit it, and unlike Cromwell, who disposes of both houses, Mazarin has had the Queen to support him in his struggle with the Parliament. More reason, then, he should protect a king pursued by Parliament. The Queen shook her head despairingly. If I judge for myself, my lord, she said, the cardinal will do nothing and will even, perhaps, act against us. The presence of my daughter and myself in France is already irksome to him. Much more so would be that of the king. My lord, added Henrietta, with a melancholy smile, it is sad and almost shameful to be obliged to say that we have passed the winter in the Louvre without money, without linen, almost without bread, and often not rising from bed because we wanted fire. Horrible, cried De Winter, the daughter of Henry IV and the wife of King Charles. Wherefore did you not apply, then, madame, to the first person you saw from us? Such is the hospitality shown to a queen by the minister from whom a king demands it. But I heard that a marriage between the Prince of Wales and Mademoiselle d'Orléans was spoken of, said De Winter. Yes, for an instant I hoped it was so. The young people felt a mutual esteem, but the Queen, who at first sanctioned their affection, changed her mind, and Monsieur, the Duc d'Orléans, who had encouraged the familiarity between them, has forbidden his daughter to think any more about the union. Oh, my lord, continued the Queen, without restraining her tears, it is better to fight as the king has done, and to die, as perhaps he will, than live in beggary like me. Courage, madame, Courage, do not despair. The interests of the French crown, endangered at this moment, are to discountenance rebellion in a neighboring nation. Mazarin, as a statesman, will understand the politic necessity. Are you sure, said the queen doubtfully, that you have not been forestalled? By whom? By the Joyces, the Prynnes, the Cromwells? By a tailor, a coachmaker, a brewer? Ah, I hope, madame, that the cardinal will not enter into negotiations with such men. Ah, what is he himself? Asked Madame Henrietta. But for the honor of the king, of the queen. Well, let us hope he will do something for the sake of their honor, said the queen. A true friend's eloquence is so powerful, my lord, that you have reassured me. Give me your hand and let us go to the minister. And yet, she added, suppose he should refuse and that the king loses the battle. His Majesty will then take refuge in Holland, where I hear His Highness the Prince of Wales now is. And can His Majesty count upon many such subjects as yourself for his flight? Alas. No, madame, answered de Winter, but the case is provided for and I am come to France to seek allies. Allies, said the queen, shaking her head. Madame, replied de Winter, provided I can find some of my good old friends of former times, I will answer for anything. Come then, my lord, said the queen, with the painful doubt that is felt by those who have suffered much. Come, and may heaven hear you. Chapter 37, Cromwell's Letter. At the very moment when the queen quitted the convent to go to the Palais Royal, a young man dismounted at the gate of this royal abode and announced to the guards that he had something of importance to communicate to Cardinal Mazarin. Although the cardinal was often tormented by fear, he was more often in need of counsel and information, and he was therefore sufficiently accessible. The true difficulty of being admitted was not to be found at the first door, and even the second was passed easily enough. But at the third watched, besides the guard and the doorkeepers, the faithful Bernouin, a Cerberus whom no speech could soften, no wand, even of gold, could charm. It was therefore at the third door that those who solicited, or were bidden to an audience, underwent their formal interrogatory. The young man, having left his horse, tied to the gate in the court, mounted the great staircase and addressed the guard in the first chamber. Cardinal Mazarin, said he. Pass on, replied the guard. The cavalier entered the second hall, which was guarded by the musketeers and doorkeepers. Have you a letter of audience? Asked a porter, advancing to the new arrival. I have one, but not one from Cardinal Mazarin. Enter and ask for Monsieur Bernouin, said the porter, opening the door of the third room. Whether he only held his usual post, or whether it was by accident, Monsieur Bernouin was found standing behind the door and must have heard all that had passed. You seek me, sir, said he. From whom may the letter be you bear to his eminence? From General Oliver Cromwell, said the newcomer. Be so good as to mention this name to his eminence, and to bring me word whether he will receive me, yes or no. Saying which, he resumed the proud and somber bearing peculiar at that time to Puritans. Bernouin cast an inquisitorial glance at the person of the young man, and entered the cabinet of the cardinal, to whom he transmitted the messenger's words. A man bringing a letter from Oliver Cromwell, said Mazarin. And what kind of a man? A genuine Englishman, your eminence. Hair sandy red, more red than sandy, gray-blue eyes, more gray than blue, and for the rest, stiff and proud. Let him give in his letter. His eminence asks for the letter, said Bernouin, passing back into the antechamber. His eminence cannot see the letter without the bearer of it, replied the young man. But to convince you that I am really the bearer of a letter, see, here it is, and kindly add, continued he, That I am not a simple messenger, but an envoy extraordinary. Bernouin re-entered the cabinet, returning in a few seconds. "Enter, sir," said he. The young man appeared on the threshold of the minister's closet, in one hand holding his hat, in the other the letter. Mazarin rose. "Have you, sir," asked he, "a letter accrediting you to me?" "There it is, my lord," said the young man. Mazarin took the letter and read it thus: "Mr. Mordaunt, one of my secretaries, will remit this letter of introduction to His Eminence, the Cardinal Mazarin, in Paris. He is also the bearer of a second confidential epistle for His Eminence. Oliver Cromwell." "Very well, Monsieur Mordaunt," said Mazarin. "Give me this second letter and sit down." The young man drew from his pocket a second letter, presented it to the cardinal, and took his seat. The cardinal, however, did not unseal the letter at once, but continued to turn it again and again in his hand. Then, in accordance with his usual custom, and judging from experience that few people could hide anything from him when he began to question them, fixing his eyes upon them at the same time, he thus addressed the messenger: "You are very young, Monsieur Mordaunt, for this difficult task of ambassador, in which the oldest diplomatists often fail. My lord, I am 23 years of age, but your eminence is mistaken in saying that I am young. I am older than your eminence, although I possess not your wisdom. Years of suffering, in my opinion, count double, and I have suffered for 20 years. "Ah, yes, I understand," said Mazarin. "One of fortune, perhaps. You are poor, are you not?" Then he added to himself, "These English revolutionists are all beggars and ill-bred. My lord, I ought to have a fortune of 6 millions, but it has been taken from me." "You are not, then, a man of the people," said Mazarin, astonished. "If I bore my proper title, I should be a lord. If I bore my name, you would have heard one of the most illustrious names of England." "What is your name, then?" asked Mazarin. "My name is Mordaunt," replied the young man, bowing. Mazarin now understood that Cromwell's envoy desired to retain his incognito. He was silent for an instant, and during that time he scanned the young man even more attentively than he had done at first. The messenger was unmoved. "Devil take these Puritans," said Mazarin aside. "They are carved from granite." Then he added aloud, "But you have relations left you. I have one remaining." 3 times I presented myself to ask his support, and 3 times he ordered his servants to turn me away. "Oh, mon Dieu, my dear mister." "Mordaunt," said Mazarin, hoping by a display of affected pity to catch the young man in a snare, "how extremely your history interests me. You know not, then, anything of your birth? You have never seen your mother?" "Yes, my lord. She came 3 times whilst I was a child to my nurse's house. I remember the last time she came as well as if it were today." "You have a good memory," said Mazarin. "Oh, yes, my lord," said the young man, with such peculiar emphasis that the cardinal felt a shudder run through every vein. "And who brought you up?" he asked again. "A French nurse, who sent me away when I was 5 years old because no one paid her for me, telling me the name of a relation of whom she had heard my mother often speak. What became of you? As I was weeping and begging on the high road, a minister from Kingston took me in, instructed me in the Calvinistic faith, taught me all he knew himself, and aided me in my researches after my family. And these researches were fruitless. Chance did everything. You discovered what had become of your mother. I learned that she had been assassinated by my relation, aided by 4 friends, but I was already aware that I had been robbed of my wealth and degraded from my nobility by King Charles I. Oh, I now understand why you are in the service of Cromwell. You hate the king." "Yes, my lord, I hate him," said the young man. Mazarin marked with surprise the diabolical expression with which the young man uttered these words. Just as, ordinarily, faces are colored by blood, his face seemed dyed by hatred and became livid. "Your history is a terrible one, Mr. Mordaunt, and touches me keenly, but happily for you, you serve an all-powerful master. He ought to aid you in your search. We have so many means of gaining information. My lord, to a well-bred dog it is only necessary to show one end of a track. He is certain to reach the other. But this relation you mentioned, do you wish me to speak to him?" said Mazarin, who was anxious to make a friend about Cromwell's person. "Thanks, my lord. I will speak to him myself. He will treat me better the next time I see him. You have the means, then, of touching him. I have the means of making myself feared." Mazarin looked at the young man, but at the fire which shot from his glance he bent his head. Then, embarrassed how to continue such a conversation, he opened Cromwell's letter. The young man's eyes gradually resumed their dull and glassy appearance, and he fell into a profound reverie. After reading the first lines of the letter, Mazarin gave a side glance at him to see if he was watching the expression of his face as he read. Observing his indifference, he shrugged his shoulders, saying, "Send on your business those who do theirs at the same time. Let us see what this letter contains." We here present the letter verbatim. "To His Eminence, Monseigneur le Cardinal Mazarini, I have wished, Monseigneur, to learn your intentions relating to the existing state of affairs in England. The two kingdoms are so near that France must be interested in our situation, as we are interested in that of France. The English are almost of one mind in contending against the tyranny of Charles and his adherents. Placed by popular confidence at the head of that movement, I can appreciate better than any other its significance and its probable results. I am at present in the midst of war, and am about to deliver a decisive battle against King Charles. I shall gain it, for the hope of the nation and the spirit of the Lord are with me. This battle won by me, the king will have no further resources in England or in Scotland, and if he is not captured or killed, he will endeavor to pass over into France to recruit soldiers and to refurnish himself with arms and money. France has already received Queen Henrietta, and, unintentionally, doubtless, has maintained a center of inextinguishable civil war in my country. But Madame Henrietta is a daughter of France, and was entitled to the hospitality of France. As to King Charles, the question must be viewed differently. In receiving and aiding him, France will censure the acts of the English nation, and thus so essentially harm England, and especially the well-being of the government, that such a proceeding will be equivalent to pronounced hostilities. At this moment, Mazarin became very uneasy at the turn which the letter was taking, and paused to glance under his eyes at the young man. The latter continued in thought. Mazarin resumed his reading. "It is important, therefore, Monseigneur, that I should be informed as to the intentions of France. The interests of that kingdom and those of England, though taking now diverse directions, are very nearly the same. England needs tranquility at home in order to consummate the expulsion of her king. France needs tranquility to establish on solid foundations the throne of her young monarch. You need, as much as we do, that interior condition of repose which, thanks to the energy of our government, we are about to attain. Your quarrels with the Parliament, your noisy dissensions with the princes, who fight for you today and tomorrow will fight against you, the popular following directed by the coadjutor, President Blankmesnil, and Councillor Brousel. All that disorder, in short, which pervades the several departments of the state, must lead you to view with uneasiness the possibility of a foreign war. For in that event England, exalted by the enthusiasm of new ideas, will ally herself with Spain, already seeking that alliance. I have therefore believed, Monseigneur, knowing your prudence and your personal relation to the events of the present time, that you will choose to hold your forces concentrated in the interior of the French kingdom and leave to her own the new government of England. That neutrality consists simply in excluding King Charles from the territory of France and in refraining from helping him, a stranger to your country, with arms, with money, or with troops. My letter is private and confidential, and for that reason I send it to you by a man who shares my most intimate counsels. It anticipates, through a sentiment which your eminence will appreciate, measures to be taken after the events. Oliver Cromwell considered it more expedient to declare himself to a mind as intelligent as Mazarin than to a queen admirable for firmness, without doubt, but too much guided by vain prejudices of birth and of divine right. Farewell, Monseigneur. Should I not receive a reply in the space of 15 days, I shall presume my letter will have miscarried. Oliver Cromwell, Mr. Mordaunt, said the cardinal, raising his voice, as if to arouse the dreamer, my reply to this letter will be more satisfactory to General Cromwell if I am convinced that all are ignorant of my having given one. Go, therefore, and await it at Boulogne-sur-Mer, and promise me to set out tomorrow morning. I promise, my lord, replied Mordaunt, but how many days does your eminence expect me to await your reply? If you do not receive it in 10 days, you can leave. Mordaunt bowed. That is not all, sir, continued Mazarin. Your private adventures have touched me to the quick, besides the letter from Mr. Cromwell makes you an important person as ambassador. Come, tell me, what can I do for you? Mordaunt reflected a moment, and after some hesitation was about to speak, when Bernouin entered hastily and bending down to the ear of the cardinal, whispered, My lord, the Queen Henrietta Maria, accompanied by an English noble, is entering the Palais Royal at this moment. Mazarin made a bound from his chair, which did not escape the attention of the young man and suppressed the confidence he was about to make. Sir, said the cardinal, you have heard me. I fix on Boulogne because I presume that every town in France is indifferent to you. If you prefer another, name it. But you can easily conceive that, surrounded as I am by influences I can only muzzle by discretion, I desire your presence in Paris to be unknown. I go, sir, said Mordaunt, advancing a few steps to the door by which he had entered. No, not that way, I beg, sir, quickly exclaimed the cardinal. Be so good as to pass by yonder gallery, by which you can regain the hall. I do not wish you to be seen leaving. Our interview must be kept secret. Mordaunt followed Bernouin, who led him through the adjacent chamber and left him with a doorkeeper, showing him the way out. Chapter 38. Henrietta Maria and Mazarin. The cardinal rose, and advanced in haste to receive the Queen of England. He showed the more respect to this queen, deprived of every mark of pomp and stripped of followers, as he felt some self-reproach for his own want of heart and his avarice. But supplicants for favor know how to accommodate the expression of their features, and the daughter of Henry IV smiled as she advanced to meet a man she hated and despised. Ah, said Mazarin to himself, what a sweet face! Does she come to borrow money of me? And he threw an uneasy glance at his strong box. He even turned inside the bevel of the magnificent diamond ring, the brilliancy of which drew every eye upon his hand, which indeed was white and handsome. Your Eminence, said the august visitor, it was my first intention to speak of the matters that have brought me here to the Queen, my sister, but I have reflected that political affairs are more especially the concern of men. Madame, said Mazarin, your Majesty overwhelms me with flattering distinction. He is very gracious, thought the Queen. Can he have guessed my errand? Give, continued the cardinal, your commands to the most respectful of your servants. "Alas, sir," replied the queen, "I have lost the habit of commanding and have adopted instead that of making petitions. I am here to petition you, too happy should my prayer be favorably heard." "I am listening, madame, with the greatest interest," said Mazarin. "Your Eminence, it concerns the war which the king, my husband, is now sustaining against his rebellious subjects. You are perhaps ignorant that they are fighting in England," added she, with a melancholy smile, "and that in a short time they will fight in a much more decided fashion than they have done hitherto." "I am completely ignorant of it, madame," said the cardinal, accompanying his words with a slight shrug of the shoulders. "Alas, our own wars quite absorb the time and the mind of a poor, incapable, infirm old minister like me." "Well, then, your Eminence," said the queen, "I must inform you that Charles I, my husband, is on the eve of a decisive engagement." In case of a check, Mazarin made a slight movement. One must foresee everything. In the case of a check, he desires to retire into France and to live here as a private individual. What do you say to this project? The cardinal had listened without permitting a single fiber of his face to betray what he felt, and his smile remained as it ever was, false and flattering. And when the queen finished speaking, he said, "Do you think, madame, that France, agitated and disturbed as it is, would be a safe retreat for a dethroned king? How will the crown, which is scarce firmly set on the head of Louis XIV, support a double weight?" "The weight was not so heavy when I was in peril," interrupted the queen with a sad smile, "and I ask no more for my husband than has been done for me. You see that we are very humble monarchs, sir." "Oh, you, madame," the cardinal hastened to say, in order to cut short the explanation he foresaw was coming. "With regard to you, that is another thing. A daughter of Henry IV, of that great, that sublime sovereign. All which does not prevent you refusing hospitality to his son-in-law, sir. Nevertheless, you ought to remember that that great, that sublime monarch, when proscribed at one time, as my husband may be, demanded aid from England, and England accorded it to him. And it is but just to say that Queen Elizabeth was not his niece." "Peccato," said Mazarin, writhing beneath this simple eloquence. "Your Majesty does not understand me. You judge my intentions wrongly, and that is partly because, doubtless, I explain myself in French. Speak Italian, sir. Ere the cardinal, your predecessor, sent our mother, Marie de Médicis, to die in exile, she taught us that language. If anything yet remains of that great, that sublime king, Henry, of whom you have just spoken, he would be much surprised at so little pity for his family being united to such a profound admiration of himself." The perspiration stood in large drops on Mazarin's brow. "That admiration is, on the contrary, so great, so real, madame," returned Mazarin, without noticing the change of language offered to him by the queen, "that if the king, Charles I, whom heaven protect from evil, came into France, I would offer him my house, my own house, but alas, it would be but an unsafe retreat. Some day the people will burn that house, as they burned that of the Maréchal d'Ancre. Poor Concino Concini. And yet he but desired the good of the people." "Yes, my lord, like yourself," said the queen, ironically. Mazarin pretended not to understand the double meaning of his own sentence, but continued to compassionate the fate of Concino Concini. "Well then, your Eminence," said the queen, becoming impatient, "what is your answer?" "Madame," cried Mazarin, more and more moved, "will your Majesty permit me to give you counsel?" "Speak, sir," replied the queen. "The counsels of so prudent a man as yourself ought certainly to be available. Madame, believe me, the king ought to defend himself to the last. He has done so, sir, and this last battle, which he encounters with resources much inferior to those of the enemy, proves that he will not yield without a struggle. But in case he is beaten— Well, madame, in that case, my advice— I know that I am very bold to offer advice to your Majesty. My advice is that the king should not leave his kingdom. Absent kings are very soon forgotten. If he passes over into France, his cause is lost. But, persisted the queen, if such be your advice and you have his interest at heart, send him help of men and money, for I can do nothing for him. I have sold even to my last diamond to aid him. If I had had a single ornament left, I should have bought wood this winter to make a fire for my daughter and myself. Oh, madame, said Mazarin, your majesty knows not what you ask. On the day when foreign succor follows in the train of a king to replace him on his throne, it is an avowal that he no longer possesses the help and love of his own subjects. To the point, sir, said the queen, to the point, and answer me, yes or no. If the king persists in remaining in England, will you send him succor? If he comes to France, will you accord him hospitality? What do you intend to do? Speak, madame, said the cardinal, affecting an effusive frankness of speech. I shall convince your majesty, I trust, of my devotion to you and my desire to terminate an affair which you have so much at heart. After which your majesty will, I think, no longer doubt my zeal in your behalf. The queen bit her lips and moved impatiently on her chair. Well, what do you propose to do? She said at length. Come, speak. I will go this instant and consult the queen, and we will refer the affair at once to Parliament. With which you are at war, is it not so? You will charge Broussel to report it. Enough, sir, enough. I understand you, or rather, I am wrong. Go to the Parliament, for it was from this Parliament, the enemy of monarchs, that the daughter of the great, the sublime Henry IV, whom you so much admire, received the only relief this winter which prevented her from dying of hunger and cold. And with these words Henrietta rose in majestic indignation, whilst the cardinal, raising his hands clasped toward her, exclaimed, Ah, madame, madame, how little you know me, mon Dieu. But Queen Henrietta, without even turning toward him who made these hypocritical pretensions, crossed the cabinet, opened the door for herself, and passing through the midst of the cardinal's numerous guards, courtiers eager to pay homage, the luxurious show of a competing royalty, she went and took the hand of De Winter, who stood apart in isolation. Poor queen, already fallen. Though all bowed before her, as etiquette required, she had now but a single arm on which she could lean. It signifies little, said Mazarin when he was alone. It gave me pain, and it was an ungracious part to play, but I have said nothing either to the one or to the other. Bernouin entered. See if the young man with the black doublet and the short hair, who was with me just now, is still in the palace. Bernouin went out and soon returned with Comminges, who was on guard. Your Eminence, said Comminges, as I was reconducting the young man for whom you have asked, he approached the glass door of the gallery and gazed intently upon some object, doubtless the picture by Raphael, which is opposite the door. He reflected for a second, and then descended the stairs. I believe I saw him mount a gray horse and leave the palace court. But is not your Eminence going to the Queen? For what purpose? Monsieur de Gittant, my uncle, has just told me that Her Majesty had received news of the army. It is well, I will go. Comminges had seen rightly, and Mordaunt had really acted as he had related. In crossing the gallery parallel to the large glass gallery, he perceived De Winter, who was waiting until the Queen had finished her negotiation. At this sight, the young man stopped short, not in admiration of Raphael's picture, but as if fascinated at the sight of some terrible object. His eyes dilated, and a shudder ran through his body. One would have said that he longed to break through the wall of glass which separated him from his enemy. For if Comminges had seen with what an expression of hatred the eyes of this young man were fixed upon De Winter, He would not have doubted for an instant that the Englishman was his eternal foe. But he stopped, doubtless to reflect. For instead of allowing his first impulse, which had been to go straight to Lord de Winter, to carry him away, he leisurely descended the staircase, left the palace with his head down, mounted his horse, which he reined in at the corner of the Rue Richelieu, and with his eyes fixed on the gate, waited until the Queen's carriage had left the court. He had not long to wait, for the Queen scarcely remained a quarter of an hour with Mazarin, but this quarter of an hour of expectation appeared a century to him. At last the heavy machine, which was called a chariot in those days, came out, rumbling against the gates, and de Winter, still on horseback, bent again to the door to converse with Her Majesty. The horses started on a trot and took the road to the Louvre, which they entered. Before leaving the convent of the Carmelites, Henrietta had desired her daughter to attend her at the palace, which she had inhabited for a long time, and which she had only left because their poverty seemed to them more difficult to bear in gilded chambers. Mordaunt followed the carriage, and when he had watched it drive beneath the sombre arches, he went and stationed himself under a wall over which the shadow was extended, and remained motionless, amidst the mouldings of Jean Goujon, like a bas-relievo, representing an equestrian statue. Chapter 39. How, sometimes, the unhappy mistake chance for Providence. "Well, madame," said de Winter, when the Queen had dismissed her attendants. "Well, my lord, what I foresaw has come to pass." "What?" "Does the cardinal refuse to receive the king?" "France refuse hospitality to an unfortunate prince." "Aye, but it is for the first time, madame. I did not say France, my lord. I said the cardinal, and the cardinal is not even a Frenchman. But did you see the Queen?" "It is useless," replied Henrietta. "The Queen will not say yes when the cardinal says no. Are you not aware that this Italian directs everything, both indoors and out? And moreover, I should not be surprised had we been forestalled by Cromwell." He was embarrassed while speaking to me, and yet quite firm in his determination to refuse. Then did you not observe the agitation in the Palais Royal, the passing to and fro of busy people? "Can they have received any news, my lord?" "Not from England, madame." "I made such haste that I am certain of not having been forestalled. I set out 3 days ago, passing miraculously through the Puritan army, and I took post horses with my servant Tony. The horses upon which we were mounted were bought in Paris. Besides, the king, I am certain, awaits your majesty's reply before risking anything." "You will tell him, my lord," resumed the Queen despairingly, "that I can do nothing, that I have suffered as much as himself, more than he has, obliged as I am to eat the bread of exile and to ask hospitality from false friends who smile at my tears. And as regards his royal person, he must sacrifice it generously and die like a king. I shall go and die by his side." "Madame, madame," exclaimed de Winter, "your majesty abandons yourself to despair, and yet perhaps there still remains some hope. No friends left, my lord, no other friends left in the wide world but yourself." "Oh, God," exclaimed the poor Queen, raising her eyes to heaven, "have you indeed taken back all the generous hearts that once existed in the world?" "I hope not, madame," replied de Winter thoughtfully. "I once spoke to you of 4 men. What can be done with 4? 4 devoted, resolute men can do much, assure yourself, madame, and those of whom I speak performed great things at one time. And where are these 4 men? Ah, that is what I do not know. It is 20 years since I saw them, and yet whenever I have seen the king in danger I have thought of them. And these men were your friends. One of them held my life in his hands and gave it to me. I know not whether he is still my friend, but since that time I have remained his. And these men are in France, my lord. I believe so. Tell me their names. Perhaps I may have heard them mentioned and might be able to aid you in finding them. One of them was called the Chevalier d'Artagnan. Ah, my lord, if I mistake not, the Chevalier d'Artagnan is lieutenant of royal guards, but take care, for I fear that this man is entirely devoted to the cardinal." "That would be a misfortune," said de Winter, "and I shall begin to think that we are really doomed." "But the others," said the queen, who clung to this last hope as a shipwrecked man clings to the hull of his vessel. "The others, my lord. The second, I heard his name by chance, for before fighting us, these 4 gentlemen told us their names. The second was called the Comte de la Fere. As for the 2 others, I had so much the habit of calling them by nicknames that I have forgotten their real ones." "Oh, mon Dieu, it is a matter of the greatest urgency to find them out," said the queen, "since you think these worthy gentlemen might be so useful to the king." "Oh, yes," said de Winter, "for they are the same men. Listen, madame, and recall your remembrances. Have you never heard that Queen Anne of Austria was once saved from the greatest danger ever incurred by a queen? Yes, at the time of her relations with Monsieur de Buckingham. It had to do in some way with certain studs and diamonds. Well, it was that affair, madame. These men are the ones who saved her, and I smile with pity when I reflect that if the names of those gentlemen are unknown to you, it is because the queen has forgotten them, who ought to have made them the first noblemen of the realm. Well then, my lord, they must be found. But what can 4 men, or rather 3 men do? For I tell you, you must not count on Monsieur d'Artagnan. It will be 1 valiant sword the less, but there will remain still 3, without reckoning my own. Now 4 devoted men around the king to protect him from his enemies, to be at his side in battle, to aid him with counsel, to escort him in flight, are sufficient, not to make the king a conqueror, but to save him if conquered. And whatever Mazarin may say, once on the shores of France your royal husband may find as many retreats and asylums as the seabird finds in a storm. Seek, then, my lord, seek these gentlemen, and if they will consent to go with you to England, I will give to each a duchy the day that we reascend the throne, besides as much gold as would pave Whitehall. Seek them, my lord, and find them, I conjure you." "I will search for them, madame," said de Winter, "and doubtless I shall find them, but time fails me." "Has your majesty forgotten that the king expects your reply and awaits it in agony? Then indeed we are lost," cried the queen, in the fullness of a broken heart. At this moment the door opened, and the young Henrietta appeared. Then the queen, with that wonderful strength which is the privilege of parents, repressed her tears and motioned to de Winter to change the subject. But that act of self-control, effective as it was, did not escape the eyes of the young princess. She stopped on the threshold, breathed a sigh, and addressing the queen, "Why, then, do you always weep, mother, when I am away from you?" she said. The queen smiled, but instead of answering, "See, de Winter," she said, "I have at least gained one thing in being only half a queen, and that is that my children call me mother instead of madame." Then turning toward her daughter, "What do you want, Henrietta?" she demanded. "My mother," replied the young princess, "a cavalier has just entered the Louvre and wishes to present his respects to your majesty. He arrives from the army and has, he says, a letter to remit to you on the part of the Marechal de Gramont, I think." "Ah," said the queen to de Winter, "he is one of my faithful adherents. But do you not observe, my dear lord, that we are so poorly served that it is left to my daughter to fill the office of doorkeeper?" "Madame, have pity on me," exclaimed de Winter. "You wring my heart." "And who is this cavalier, Henrietta?" asked the queen. "I saw him from the window, madame. He is a young man that appears scarce 16 years of age, and is called the Viscount de Bragelonne." The queen, smiling, made a sign with her head. The young princess opened the door, and Raoul appeared on the threshold. Advancing a few steps toward the queen, he knelt down. "Madame," said he. "I bear to your majesty a letter from my friend the Count de Guiche, who told me he had the honor of being your servant. This letter contains important news and the expression of his respect." At the name of the Count de Guiche, a blush spread over the cheeks of the young princess, and the queen glanced at her with some degree of severity. "You told me that the letter was from the Maréchal de Gramont, Henrietta," said the queen. "I thought so, madame," stammered the young girl. "It is my fault, madame," said Raoul. "I did announce myself, in truth, as coming on the part of the Maréchal de Gramont, but being wounded in the right arm, he was unable to write, and therefore the Count de Guiche acted as his secretary." "There has been fighting, then?" asked the queen, motioning to Raoul to rise. "Yes, madame," said the young man. At this announcement of a battle having taken place, the princess opened her mouth as though to ask a question of interest, but her lips closed again without articulating a word, while the color gradually faded from her cheeks. The queen saw this, and doubtless her maternal heart translated the emotion for addressing Raoul again. "And no evil has happened to the young Count de Guiche?" she asked. "For not only is he our servant, as you say, sir, but more, he is one of our friends." "No, madame," replied Raoul. "On the contrary, he gained great glory and had the honor of being embraced by His Highness, the Prince, on the field of battle." The young princess clapped her hands, and then, ashamed of having been betrayed into such a demonstration of joy, she half turned away and bent over a vase of roses, as if to inhale their odor. "Let us see," said the queen, "what the Count says." And she opened the letter and read, "Madam, being unable to have the honor of writing to you myself, by reason of a wound I have received in my right hand, I have commanded my son, the Count de Guiche, who, with his father, is equally your humble servant, to write to tell you that we have just gained the Battle of Lens, and that this victory cannot fail to give great power to Cardinal Mazarin and to the Queen over the affairs of Europe. If Her Majesty will have faith in my counsels, she ought to profit by this event to address at this moment, in favor of her august husband, the court of France. The Vicomte de Bragelonne, who will have the honor of remitting this letter to your Majesty, is the friend of my son, who owes to him his life. He is a gentleman in whom your Majesty may confide entirely, in case your Majesty may have some verbal or written order to remit to me. I have the honor to be, with respect, etc., Maréchal de Gramont." At the moment mention occurred of his having rendered a service to the Count, Raoul could not help turning his glance toward the young princess, and then he saw in her eyes an expression of infinite gratitude to the young man. He no longer doubted that the daughter of King Charles I loved his friend. "The Battle of Lens gained," said the queen. "They are lucky here indeed, they can gain battles." "Yes, the Maréchal de Gramont is right. This will change the aspect of French affairs, but I much fear it will do nothing for English, even if it does not harm them. This is recent news, sir," continued she, "and I thank you for having made such haste to bring it to me. Without this letter I should not have heard till tomorrow, perhaps after tomorrow, the last of all Paris." "Madame," said Raoul, "the Louvre is but the second palace this news has reached. It is as yet unknown to all, and I had sworn to the Count de Guiche to remit this letter to your Majesty before even I should embrace my guardian." "Your guardian? Is he, too, a Bragelonne?" asked Lord de Winter. "I once knew a Bragelonne. Is he still alive?" "No, sir, he is dead, and I believe it is from him my guardian, whose near relation he was, inherited the estate from which I take my name." "And your guardian, sir?" asked the queen, who could not help feeling some interest in the handsome young man before her. "What is his name?" "The Comte de la Fere, madame," replied the young man, bowing. De Winter made a gesture of surprise, and the queen turned to him with a start of joy. "The Comte de la Fere," she cried. "Have you not mentioned that name to me? As for De Winter, he could scarcely believe that he had heard aright. "The Comte de la Fere," he cried in his turn. "Oh, sir, reply, I entreat you. Is not the Comte de la Fere a noble whom I remember, handsome and brave, a musketeer under Louis XIII, who must be now about 47 or 48 years of age? Yes, sir, you are right in every particular. And who served under an assumed name, under the name of Athos. Latterly I heard his friend, Monsieur d'Artagnan, give him that name. That is it, madame, that is the same. God be praised. And he is in Paris," continued he, addressing Raoul, then turning to the queen. "We may still hope. Providence has declared for us, since I have found this brave man again in so miraculous a manner. And, sir, where does he reside, pray?" "The Comte de la Fere lodges in the Rue Guénégaud, Hôtel du Grand Roi Charlemagne." "Thanks, sir." "Inform this dear friend that he may remain within, that I shall go and see him immediately." "Sir, I obey with pleasure if Her Majesty will permit me to depart." "Go, Monsieur de Bragelonne," said the queen, "and rest assured of our affection." Raoul bent respectfully before the two princesses, and bowing to De Winter, departed. The queen and De Winter continued to converse for some time in low voices, in order that the young princess should not overhear them. But the precaution was needless. She was in deep converse with her own thoughts. Then, when De Winter rose to take leave, "Listen, my lord," said the queen. "I have preserved this diamond cross which came from my mother, and this order of St. Michael which came from my husband. They are worth about 50,000 pounds. I had sworn to die of hunger rather than part with these precious pledges. But now that this ornament may be useful to him or his defenders, everything must be sacrificed. Take them, and if you need money for your expedition, sell them fearlessly, my lord. But should you find the means of retaining them, remember, my lord, that I shall esteem you as having rendered the greatest service that a gentleman can render to a queen, and in the day of my prosperity, he who brings me this order and this cross shall be blessed by me and my children." "Madame," replied De Winter, "your Majesty will be served by a man devoted to you. I hasten to deposit these two objects in a safe place, nor should I accept them if the resources of our ancient fortune were left to us. But our estates are confiscated, our ready money is exhausted, and we are reduced to turn to service everything we possess. In an hour hence I shall be with the Comte de la Fere, and tomorrow your Majesty shall have a definite reply." The queen tendered her hand to Lord de Winter, who, kissing it respectfully, went out and traversed alone, and unconducted those large, dark, and deserted apartments, brushing away tears which, blasé as he was by 50 years spent as a courtier, he could not withhold at the spectacle of royal distress so dignified, yet so intense. Chapter 40. Uncle and Nephew. The horse and servant belonging to De Winter were waiting for him at the door. He proceeded toward his abode very thoughtfully, looking behind him from time to him to contemplate the dark and silent frontage of the Louvre. It was then that he saw a horseman, as it were, detach himself from the wall and follow him at a little distance. In leaving the Palais Royal, he remembered to have observed a similar shadow. "Tony," he said, motioning to his groom to approach. "Here I am, my lord. Did you remark that man who is following us?" "Yes, my lord." "Who is he?" "I do not know, only he has followed your grace from the Palais Royal, stopped at the Louvre to wait for you, and now leaves the Louvre with you." "Some spy of the cardinal," said De Winter to him, aside. "Let us pretend not to notice that he is watching us." And spurring on, he plunged into the labyrinth of streets which led to his hotel, situated near the Marais, for having for so long a time lived near the Place Royale, Lord de Winter naturally returned to lodge near his ancient dwelling. The unknown spurred his horse to a gallop. De Winter dismounted at his hotel and went up into his apartment, intending to watch the spy. But as he was about to place his gloves and hat on a table, he saw reflected in a glass opposite to him a figure which stood on the threshold of the room. He turned around, and Mordaunt stood before him. There was a moment of frozen silence between these two. "Sir," said De Winter, "I thought I had already made you aware that I am weary of this persecution. Withdraw, then, or I shall call and have you turned out as you were in London." "I am not your uncle, I know you not." "My uncle," replied Mordaunt, with his harsh and bantering tone, "you are mistaken. You will not have me turned out this time as you did in London. You dare not. As for denying that I am your nephew, you will think twice about it, now that I have learned some things of which I was ignorant a year ago." "And how does it concern me what you have learned?" said De Winter. "Oh, it concerns you very closely, my uncle, I am sure, and you will soon be of my opinion," added he, with a smile which sent a shudder through the veins of him he thus addressed. "When I presented myself before you for the first time in London, it was to ask you what had become of my fortune. The second time it was to demand who had sullied my name. And this time I come before you to ask a question far more terrible than any other, to say to you as God said to the first murderer, 'Cain, what hast thou done to thy brother Abel?' My lord, what have you done with your sister, who was my mother?" De Winter shrank back from the fire of those scorching eyes. "Your mother," he said. "Yes, my lord, my mother," replied the young man, advancing into the room until he was face to face with Lord de Winter, and crossing his arms. "I have asked the headsman of Bethune," he said, his voice hoarse and his face livid with passion and grief. "And the headsman of Bethune gave me a reply." De Winter fell back in a chair as though struck by a thunderbolt, and in vain attempted a reply. "Yes," continued the young man, "all is now explained. With this key I open the abyss. My mother inherited an estate from her husband. You have assassinated her. My name would have secured me the paternal estate. You have deprived me of it. You have despoiled me of my fortune. I am no longer astonished that you knew me not. I am not surprised that you refused to recognize me. When a man is a robber, it is hard to call him nephew whom he has impoverished. When one is a murderer, to recognize the man whom one has made an orphan." These words produced a contrary effect to that which Mordaunt had anticipated. De Winter remembered the monster that Milady had been. He rose, dignified and calm, restraining by the severity of his look the wild glance of the young man. "You desire to fathom this horrible secret," said De Winter. "Well, then, so be it. Know, then, what manner of woman it was for whom today you call me to account. That woman had, in all probability, poisoned my brother, and in order to inherit from me, she was about to assassinate me in my turn. I have proof of it. What say you to that? I say that she was my mother. She caused the unfortunate Duke of Buckingham to be stabbed by a man who was, ere that, honest, good, and pure. What say you to that crime, of which I have the proof? She was my mother. On our return to France, she had a young woman who was attached to one of her opponents poisoned in the convent of the Augustines at Bethune. Will this crime persuade you of the justice of her punishment? For of all this I have the proofs. She was my mother," cried the young man, who uttered these 3 successive exclamations with constantly increasing force. At last, charged with murders with debauchery, hated by everyone and yet threatening still, like a panther thirsting for blood, she fell under the blows of men whom she had rendered desperate, though they had never done her the least injury. She met with judges whom her hideous crimes had evoked, and that executioner you saw, that executioner who you say told you everything, that executioner, if he told you everything, told you that he leaped with joy in avenging on her his brother's shame and suicide. Depraved as a girl, adulterous as a wife, an unnatural sister, homicide, poisoner, execrated by all who knew her, by every nation that had been visited by her, she died accursed by heaven and earth. A sob which Mordaunt could not repress burst from his throat, and his livid face became suffused with blood. He clenched his fists. Sweat covered his face, his hair, like Hamlet's, stood on end, and racked with fury he cried out, "Silence, sir! She was my mother. Her crimes, I know them not. Her disorders, I know them not. Her vices, I know them not. But this I know, that I had a mother, that 5 men leagued against one woman, murdered her clandestinely by night, silently, like cowards. I know that you were one of them, my uncle, and that you cried louder than the others. She must die. Therefore I warn you, and listen well to my words, that they may be engraved upon your memory, never to be forgotten. This murder which has robbed me of everything, this murder which has deprived me of my name, this murder which has impoverished me, this murder which has made me corrupt, wicked, implacable, I shall summon you to account for it first, and then those who were your accomplices when I discover them." With hatred in his eyes, foaming at his mouth, and his fist extended, Mordaunt had advanced one more step, a threatening, terrible step, toward De Winter. The latter put his hand to his sword, and said, with the smile of a man who for 30 years has jested with death, "Would you assassinate me, sir? Then I shall recognize you as my nephew, for you would be a worthy son of such a mother." "No," replied Mordaunt, forcing his features and the muscles of his body to resume their usual places and be calm. "No, I shall not kill you, at least not at this moment, for without you I could not discover the others. But when I have found them, then tremble, sir. I stabbed to the heart the headsman of Bethune, without mercy or pity, and he was the least guilty of you all." With these words, the young man went out and descended the stairs with sufficient calmness to pass unobserved. Then upon the lowest landing-place he passed Tony, leaning over the balustrade, waiting only for a call from his master to mount to his room. But De Winter did not call. Crushed, enfeebled, he remained standing and with listening ear. Then only when he had heard the step of the horse going away he fell back on a chair, saying, "My God, I thank thee that he knows me only.